Let's get to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers. Mike Evans down 8.4 spots. New ADP 37.4. Chris Godwin is up 11.5. New ADP 59.8. Evans was the wide receiver 7 last year. To me, Mike Evans is one of the safest players in the league that you could pencil in for 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns that isn't getting drafted in the first round. So I have so many shares of Mike Evans. I always will. I know people are saying he's getting older, but again, every year with 1,000 yards, I'm going to take my chances on Mike Evans. Again, I said you could pencil him in for 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. Can we say that about DK Metcalf, who we talked about earlier? I don't think so. I mean, maybe he could hit it, sure, but you can't pencil him in for it. And Godwin, I know we talked about his percentage of snaps in the slot was ridiculously low last year, dropped a lot. I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I'm sorry. But they did not Dave Canales. I'm sorry. That was the offensive coordinator there. Now I forget. I apologize. I'm in a brain for it, but they did say they want to play more in the slot with Chris Godwin. So I do think Chris Godwin has a bounce back year from wide receiver 29, his lowest finish since the 2020 season. Anthony, I'll go to you first. What says you on these Buccaneers wide receivers?
Well, number one, the OC is Liam Cohen. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Godwin last year, 26 in slot snaps, 32.1% rate. That's way too low for a guy like Chris Godwin. First on Chris Godwin, whose ADP is starting to climb now, as it should. Last year, he had one of his worst years in fantasy. He's always dependable. If we go back to 2019, and that was his breakout year, wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game. I believe Winston was probably the quarterback, or like Ryan Fitzpatrick, probably Winston, or both. But since then, wide receiver 15, wide receiver 7, wide receiver 15, last year, wide receiver 34. So if we look at the complete sample size, last year was an outlier of a down year for Chris Godwin. He still saw volume. 131 targets. What was the issue? Probably the catch rate. Only had 83 for just over 1,000 yards, only 2 touchdowns. Past 2 years, totaled 5 touchdowns. 2021, he had 5 in that year alone. So we could expect potentially a positive touchdown regression where Mike Evans might see an actual touchdown regression because he feasted off of the big play and touchdowns last year. That was in a Canales offense. Maybe this offense favors Godwin a little bit more. Maybe it doesn't go downfield as much, or, maybe Baker Mayfield's, he has a little bit of a regression without Dave Canales, who is one of those, I don't want to call him a quarterback guru, but he has developed some nice quarterbacks. Now, last year, Chris Godwin, even the past 2 years, dealt with injuries, starting with knee surgery rehab in 2022 preseason, a week 1 hamstring strain in 2022, and then last year, week 8 neck soreness, week 11 knee and elbow soreness. So he's been banged up. I think a healthy Chris Godwin, and again, at his ADP compared to what we normally see, he's probably the Tampa Bay wide receiver I'm going to have a lot more shares of. Godwin last year, we talked about that catch rate, 53rd in catchable target rate, 73rd in target quality rating. So not the greatest volume going in his direction, despite seeing 131 targets.
And, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, I did find the numbers for the percentage of the slot, his plays in the slot, which I think might have had something to do with where he finished last year. Maybe has a little bit of trouble when he's not playing in the slot. Previous two seasons, we have 2021, 70.4% of the snaps in the slot. Next year, 72.9%. Last year, he dropped to 37%. So if they get him more in the slot, then why can't he jump up?
And in terms of efficiency, 2022 with Brady, 9.8 yards per catch, career low. Last year, 12.3, his most since 2020. So it wasn't Godwin. It was the quality of the targets going to Godwin. So I'll buy in to his ADP right now. I think it's about fair for Chris Godwin. When it comes to Mike Evans, my biggest issue with Mike Evans, and I get what you're saying, Hoff, pencil him in, just like we would pencil in Keenan Allen all those years with Justin Herbert and the Chargers. You've been penciling him in for a top 12 fantasy finish, PPR fantasy points per game. The issue what I have with Mike Evans right now, last year, his ADP was free, and he cashed the fuck in. You won leagues with Mike Evans. This year, he ain't free anymore. This year, you're paying up for Mike Evans. 23 ADP. You know, right around late second, early third round. What if, because he's entering his age 31 season, what if age catches up? What if Baker catches up? Like, I'd rather have Godwin, because I know what Godwin is a high floor player. And again, he's cheaper. So, like, if you miss, if Mike Evans, you're drafting him at his current ADP and you miss, it's not going to cripple your team. It is going to hurt your fantasy team.
Pete, you want to sound in on all this?
Yeah, I compare Mike Evans to a guy like Jalen Waddle in terms of that's somebody who's going in that range that I'm actually more comfortable taking a swing on Jalen Waddle over Mike Evans in a more explosive offense. System is staying the same. We know the target share is going to be there because outside of Tyreek Hill, it's Waddle. Jonnu Smith's not going to be a target monster. I like him this year. And Odell Beckham comes over from Baltimore, but he's a shell of himself. He's maybe going to get 50 targets probably this year or 50 catches or whatever the case may be. But I'd rather take a guy like Jalen Waddle, who I think has top 5. I think he could finish. It wouldn't shock me if he finishes the 5th receiver. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but when you look at Jalen Waddle, and give me a second to pull up some of his metrics, but in terms of Mike Evans, I just don't see 13 touchdowns happening again this year. I mean, I know he had 14 2 years ago, but he had 6 in 2022. I'll meet you in the middle there and say maybe 8, but I don't see Mike Evans finishing as a top 8 wide receiver. And I look at guys in his range, like if I'm taking a swing on a receiver, like at that price, like I want a guy that has top 5 potential, possibly, like if possible. And if I'm banking on Jalen Waddle or Mike Evans, I'll bank on the talent with Waddle, who he's 25 years old. He plays in one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. Prior to last season, he was wide receiver 12 in average points per game and wide receiver 15, which is right around where Mike Evans was, pretty much identical finishes, and he's younger. So and I just know what I'm getting out of this offense. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. And Tua Tagovailoa may be playing for a contract year at quarterback. Yeah. So all that to say, I trust the guy in a better offensive system. I don't know what's going to happen with Baker Mayfield. I like him. It was a great story last year, but they've added some weapons on this Buccaneers offense in the draft with Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, solid. Like there's other weapons here. And Chris Godwin didn't get, if he's going to play in the slot, he may command more targets than we've seen. Cooper Kupp in that Rams offense played in the slot a ton. Right. And this is an offensive coordinator that comes from that Rams system prior to being in college. I think he was a coach that was it Kentucky or was it it might have been Kentucky. I can't remember the school. Yeah. So prior to that, he comes from the Rams system. They love to use their slot receivers. Godwin was underused last year. Evans had a huge year. Right. I'm taking a guy like Jalen Waddle at that price, and I'm just really fading. If I had to go with a guy like, here's one more example. I would take Evans over Devontae Adams, and Devontae Adams is going a little bit ahead of him. Yeah. Adams is a little more expensive, and I don't know what's going on with the quarterback position there. And we've seen that the Buccaneers offense was at least successful last year, though they're getting a new offensive coordinator. They were still successful, and there's continuity there. So that's that'll kind of wrap up my point. There were some stats with Jalen Waddle. I wasn't expecting to kind of talk about him, so I don't really have them up in front of me. But all in all, I mean, separation wise, I mean, his route win rate, he was second in the NFL last year, second in the NFL for routes won. That offense is going to be at a fast pace. They're going to score a lot of points. I know they're going to score a lot of points. I want pieces. I don't know what the Bucs offense is going to look like this year.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you guys are saying, but I'm still going to go Mike Evans. We've seen a lot of questions throughout his career as far as who's the quarterback, who's the offensive coordinator, who's this, who's that. Yeah, but he always seems to find a way. Anthony, you can counter with any points if you want, but I do just want to bring up, I'm curious because FF Rabbit Dad asked us, since we're talking Bucs pass catchers, Otten 30-year breakout thoughts. I'm curious. I would say no. He did play 96% of the snaps last year, only 12% target share. But I'm just curious what you think a breakout year would be for Cade Otton. So if you want to give us a stat line, we can talk about it. But Anthony, did you have any other points on the Evans and Godwin, or we
just off of a little point on Jalen Waddle here, but to Pete's point, guys going around Mike Evans that I like more. And Waddle's a little bit more expensive when you look at the ADP, but again, I like Waddle. I like Nico. I like both 49ers receivers more just because they're better quarterback, reliable systems, even guys going behind Evans. DJ Moore, I'm really in on DJ Moore this year, as crazy as that sounds, because I was never a DJ Moore guy. I bought in last year, it cashed in for me, and I would love to assume that Caleb Williams is going to be an upgrade over Justin Fields. So before we move off to Pete's point on Jalen Waddle, hyper-efficient year in 2022. As a wide receiver, 12 in fantasy points per game. That was a year that Tyreek Hill was also there. So they can both pop in this offense. So what was the issue with Jalen Waddle this year? Why was his efficiency down? 2022, 18.1 yards per catch, down to 14.1. Half the touchdowns on the same number, really 72 receptions last year, 75. So efficiency down. Why? Jalen Waddle was banged up a lot. Let's go. I mean, his entire season, starting with the week 2 concussion, week 8 back, week 11 knee, week 15 bruised chest, week 16 high ankle sprain. This dude was never healthy. No. This is another one. Give me a healthy Jalen Waddle in that system. I don't know top 5. I think Pete's going a little.
No, I'm not saying that. I think just outside 6, 5, 6, 7 wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. But I'm with you, though. Like, I think top 5's crazy, but I'm with you. This guy's a wide receiver 1. And the reason why they paid up for him this year is because when Tyreek leaves, this guy is a locked and loaded wide receiver 1 in this offense.
Yeah. And banged up last year with all those injuries, he still had 1,000 yards. I mean, fantasy-wise, wide receiver 21 wasn't sexy, but he still had 1,000 yards in a season where he was banged up. And Raheem Mostert had 21 touchdowns last year. Is he going to have all those touchdowns? They got to go somewhere. You know what I mean? Now, Jonnu Smith might eat into those a little bit, but 4 touchdowns for Waddle is pretty low on an offense that was high-powered. I just think they're going to be better. We didn't really talk about Godwin. So, do we want to touch on him a little bit?
I did. You can.
Okay.
I did.
He did. Yeah. You can.
Let me throw out a guy here next to Godwin's ADP. I'll throw out a couple, and you just tell me in or out, right? Terry McLaurin or Chris Godwin?
Godwin,
but close.
Okay, I would actually probably go Terry.
Yeah, I was leaning
he'd be
Terry.
the number 1 target. Yeah, and Cliff there. But okay, that's fine. Calvin Ridley or Chris Godwin?
I might go Ridley. I might buy back into Ridley this year.
I think I go Ridley, yeah.
Okay, 2 more. Keenan Allen or Chris Godwin?
Godwin.
Keenan
Allen.
Yep.
Wow. Well. Jesus. What is this now? Where'd that come from?
Let me do 2 more just because the last one will be a good one.
Jesus.
One more. Jaden Reeder, Chris Godwin.
Well, I'm sorry. What was that?
Jaden Reeder, Chris Godwin.
Chris Godwin.
Close. That's close.
It's close, but I go Godwin.
Yeah, just more mouths to feed on that Packers offense. All right, last one, and this will be interesting to hear Anthony's thoughts. Ladd McConkey or Chris Godwin?
Oh, I'm going McConkey. I'm that much in on Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, I'll go McConkey as well, actually. I'll skate. I'll do that.
Okay.
Right. But really quick, before we get to our next player, what happened between you and Keenan Allen?
Nothing.
Oh, that was
new team, different situation.
So that's how you feel when you're neutral on a guy? Jeez. Yeah, wait till we rope Austin Eckler into a conversation later. We'll see how that goes. All right.
Well, it's safe to say that the chat is a little split. Will says Allen. Most everybody else agrees that they prefer Godwin. Everybody agrees on Ridley pretty much. And then McLaurin for Jamie, so he's with me there.